So how can we recycle, reuse, reimagine, repurpose all this webinar content to get the most life out of it? And I like to think of it as webinar Inception, and hopefully most of you get that reference and have seen this movie by now. But think of it as a webinar inside of a webinar. Take into mind what your cut points are going to be within that webinar when you're editing it. So mini webinars that you can splice out of that 45 or 60-minute long recording. And a good thing to consider here is playing ahead with your speakers so that they're on board with the concepts of when they start to create their content, so that they have this kind of logical placement in mind where you can divide up that recorded content. So think of it almost as chaptering your webinar, and can those snippets stand out alone and potentially make sense? What should my recordings look like? And I liked this little comic. I thought it was fitting. There's what you really want to say, what they're interested in, and there's this little tiny bit of relevance in between that you're trying to capture. And like I said before, snippets. You really need to make this content that's digestible. Your listeners probably aren't going to sit through an entire 45-minute, 60-minute webinar recording. They're probably fast-forwarding, trying to find the parts that are most relevant to their problem, and I know this because I do the exact same thing. So find that content that you think will be most relevant to your audience, and then repurpose the heck out of that recording snippet. And you might ask, how do I know what those parts are? Think about things like, were there a lot of chat questions during that portion asking about that content? Did you ask a poll maybe beforehand that gave you insight about that portion of your webinar as to what was important to people or what challenges they were facing? Think about your own attention span. How long do you watch a video? A minute, maybe 3 minutes max? The people that you're targeting, they're probably marketers too, potentially, and they probably have about the same amount of bandwidth. So give them a succinct message. Cut out the fluff and just really give them the good stuff. So a couple more quick ideas about things to think about when you're making those clips. This seems pretty elementary, but honestly, the very first thing you need to do is make sure that your content is being recorded. And that's an easy piece to forget sometimes when you've got so much going on in planning a webinar recording. So make sure that you are hitting that record button in the first place, or none of this will work. Also, make sure that you're not date stamping it or referencing past or future information potentially in that webinar, so there's some context for someone that's maybe not watching the entire webinar recording. Make it entertaining, and by using features like an app share, take a poll like we did earlier. If your conferencing platform has like video clip playback, definitely use a feature like that. Don't let it be your whole clip per se, but make sure that it is assisting in the point that you're trying to make and hold their attention. Make sure that your slides are eye-catching or explanatory. Move to them quickly so that your recording doesn't seem like it's maybe just a soundbite with a standstill image. And lastly, take advantage of different editing tools. Maybe your webinar platform has a great one that you like to utilize. There's other ones like Camtasia and Audacity for cutting out those really important pieces. Also, there's platforms like Wistia and Vidyard that are players in and of themselves after you've cut that webinar content down, and you can put your recordings into these particular players and push them out to YouTube and embed them on different web pages on your site or landing pages. You can actually put call to actions over these video snippets that you have to measure engagement, test the links, A/B test what your splash screens are looking like, etc. So these are a couple of really cool tools to check out too if you're going down the road of making this on-demand content more available and more engaging. And then lastly here, just a quick kind of example of a recording that keeps on giving. We recently did, this was one of our own webinars. It was called Maximizing the Impact of Webinars as a Lead Gen Channel, which is exactly what we're talking about today. And we were able to cut this 60-minute webinar into 2 to 3 minute snippets that captured the essence of really that entire event, but each of them talked about a very specific part of that topic. And we then put those snippets onto landing pages and drove traffic to them via different means of promotional mediums like social, email series, blog series, LinkedIn group discussions and polls, our archive page, all those good things. And we actually use Vidyard to do the measurement behind this. And right now we're in the process of testing these and all those different factors that I mentioned previously so that we can really maximize this recorded content and continue to capture leads after the live event, which is really what we're talking about here today. And this is just one webinar. So just think about how many that you potentially have sitting around or maybe just on your archive page that you can start to do this process with.